So I went to see Morag on Friday to go through what we're going to talk about. What she's going to talk about. She doesn't really need me here. She's the most brilliant, articulate, amazing woman that you will ever be happy to hear talk. So I'm really unnecessary. But I went to see her on Friday, and just coincidentally, it turned out that we both knew Lee McQueen. So, and neither of us knew that about each other. So it makes it sort of especially important and nice to be here. So how did you knew him in 1990?
So I went out to work for Michele De Lucchi because I was obsessed with Memphis in 1990. It was after Memphis, and Alexander McQueen was working for Romeo and Julie Cutting before he was famous. And we just hung out all summer together. He kept on wanting me to go to some strange bars, places, underground somewhere. I didn't do that so much, but I did stay up above ground with him. And yeah, and we just went to all these clubs, and it was a brilliant summer. And then he became famous.
and rightly so. And this is obviously some of the outcome of that fame. You might have noticed that we changed the title of the talk, which it had said social design. Morag was a bit concerned that people might think that it was going down the route of the sort of social design that people are very invested in at the moment, where with a sort of behavioural practice around design. But I think Morag's design is very social. Morag was the first person who introduced jazzy hoardings to the streets of London, which we now, and there's a story about that, which are now completely normal. And to me, that's part of our social environment and impacts on us. She's also done incredible work in hospitals, in children's wards. And does extraordinary projects in the community, which you're going to talk about. But first of all, I think you're going to start by telling us about your really amazing family, which explains quite a lot about how somebody who was nominally a graphic designer has managed to expand the boundaries of their practice in a way like I don't know anybody who's done it to quite this degree. So here you go.
So I'm totally London-born, London-bred, from Holloway, and so now I live in Hoxton, so it's like 3 miles away from where I was born. And this is my family, part of my family. My great-grandmother, who was a high diver, and she's German, and my great-grandfather, who was a bit of English, and we don't know what the other side, what anything else was.
Half a windmill.
Yeah, half a windmill, yeah. And he was Busby, and he was in travelling circus, but then he ended up in this permanent circus in Paris. And then my great-great-grandmother found him and brought him to London. And so what I always think is so amazing about my great-grandmother, too many greats, great-grandmother, is I didn't know what a high diver was. Oh, sorry. That should be a video that plays. Yeah. I didn't know what a high diver was until I watched this film. It's called Caravan or something. And you actually jump off into a pool of water that's really tiny. So I think that's a pretty brave woman. And she just did it because they couldn't find anything else for her to do. So if you see it goes in this tiny little splash at the bottom. And so basically you die if you don't get it right. And then my great-grandfather, on my French side, my grandmother was French, he was a salon painter in Paris. And then this is when they came to London. I don't think they dressed in these outfits all the time, but they came to this terraced house in working-class London, and and they were just this bohemian family, and that's how I sort of grew up. My dad, he was a classical musician, Henry Myerscough, and his brother was also a musician. They were sort of child prodigies and went to the Royal Academy. And this is my grandmother. She worked for Hartnell's, and our house in Holloway was it was bombed during the war, the road, and everything was quite hard work. But she made her house a French salon. So she got all her family in France to paint all this stuff and bring it to London, and so she lived in this fantasy world. So even outside it was quite sort of extreme, hard. It was hard in Holloway, I'd say. She had this sort of a fantasy that she lived in.
It's still in place, isn't it?
And it's still there, yeah.
I really want to go see it.
Yes, it's still exactly like that. It hasn't changed. even though she's not alive, or anybody's not alive anymore. And this is my dad. I can't play an instrument, I can't speak French, because I hated my dad practicing, because we always had to go out of the room, and also my dad used to tell me off because I didn't do my pronunciation of French. So when you're a little child, you want to avoid it. But then I did love doing tech or embroidery with my mum, so that's me in the middle. So we just made in our house at home, and just made and made. And when I was at the Royal College, instead of doing posters and various things that I should have been doing as a graphic designer, I made opera sets and reinterpreted the libretto of The Turn of the Screw for Benjamin Britten. So I think that's probably...
And got into terrible trouble. She left the Royal College with them telling her that she was a complete failure and was never going to make it as a designer. So.
Yeah, I was told I would never ever get a job, and that that there was, just because I didn't do what everybody wanted me to do. But the things that I did really, an exhibition that I went to see that profoundly changed me was Hockney Paints a Stage, that was at Hayward Gallery, and it was just incredible. I went to that exhibition and just thought, wow, you can make these environments. I mean, they're quite like my grandmother's environment, but you can make these environments that change everything, and they're just in these internal spaces. There was something about it, and I think from seeing that, it's been my mission ever since, although I maybe didn't even know. Should we move on?
So, yes, well, now we're on to
the studio.
The studio. And I think one thing that's interesting about Morag, and I know that Sarah Band asked us to talk about this, was that how you can actually define your own practice, and how you can make a career that defies convention. And one way that you've done that, when you she left the Royal College and set up on her own, but called herself Studio Myerscough, which is very...
Yeah, I called myself Studio Myerscough at that time, and that was 19... Well, I'd been working with another girl, Jane, and we would Myerscough chip chase, but she wanted to go and... We had some money, and I wanted to buy computers, and she wanted to do a bathroom up, so I thought that maybe we weren't going in quite the same direction, so we went on our own. And then at that time, because I'd come back from Italy, when I'd been in Italy, I didn't want to stay there. I was offered to stay there, but I came back because I wanted to beat the boys in London. I wanted to have a female company, and when I was in Italy, I knew that wasn't possible. I knew that it was too controlled, but I knew in London that you were able to do, even at that time, whatever you wanted to do. And so when Jane left, I just decided, well, what do I do now? It was middle of the recession, it was 93. Do I go and try and get a job, or do I just try and do it on my own? And so then I thought, yeah, okay, I'm going to do it. But then I was too scared to call myself Morag Myerscough, because I thought that people would just think, oh, I'm sitting on my... It wasn't as a woman or anything, it was just that I'm sitting on my own, sadly, in this studio, and there's nobody else. So I said I was Studio Myerscough, which then immediately elevated me, that I had lots of people working for me. And then it went, but it sort of ran away with me, because in the end, everybody thought like I had 25 people working for me, and I've had phases of people, but in the end, I ended up just me and one or two assistants. So it's good for you and bad for you. And now, if I had my time again, I'd been a little bit more confident, I would have done my name. I would have gone Morag Myerscough. So now, in the last 6 years, I've gone back to using my name and not using Studio Myerscough, so that people can recognise it's my work, and it's not necessarily just a company or whatever.
So what are we looking at here?
So this is how it is now. So now I don't even have an assistant, except for my dog. This is my old dog, Lemmy, and I have a new dog, Elvis. So there's often in the studio, there's me and just the pup. And then there's Luke in the audience, and now I work with Luke a lot on big projects, and he's moved into the back of the studio with his big 1959 El Camino that he's doing up. And so we work together, and we make various different projects together. This is in Ditchling at the moment, this sign machine. And then I work with lots of groups of people come in and help me paint basically now. So I've totally, what I've loved about my career is I've been able to be as flexible as I've wanted to. So I just, over time, just sort of gone on different movements. And so now it's as I like it best, really. I quite like being on my own quite a lot because I like listening to Radio 4 and not talking to anybody.
But I think it's interesting how, in a way, you've bought your own independence. And we were talking about that the other day. And she makes it all sound very effortless, but in the 90s, you worked very much with really big companies, being a graphic designer, creating really boring logos, to their briefs, and making a lot of money. And you invested that money in a property, it was in Clerkenwell Festival. And then eventually sold that and moved to the studio. It's got this amazing top-lit studio that anybody in this room who is a sort of maker creative would be so envious of, and a house on top. And you strove really hard to create your own freedom in that respect, I think, and I think that's an interesting lesson to hear about.
I think I had a mission. My parents absolutely had no money at all, and when you live with sort of really not much money, I think you respond in one way or another, and I responded because when my parents were in their 50s, because my dad lived for the moment and he was a session musician, the money went in the pot, it was spent. They didn't have money to live a full life in their 50s when my dad wasn't really playing so much anymore. And I really noticed that, and I thought that was really sad that they couldn't live a more exciting life. So I had this from very young that I wanted to be completely independent. I wanted to earn money to be able to live a life that I could choose rather than being controlled by sort of lack of money. So that's why I worked.
The work that you've been able to take, I mean, a lot of the work that Morag does is, incredibly poorly financed and is
but now
not what you would remotely live off.
I think there's different phases. I've had a long career and hopefully still go on. But I think there's different phases in your life, and maybe when you're in your 30s to 40s, that's when I made most of the money that I then invested in things. So my parents had never bought a house, they'd never done anything. I never even told my dad when I bought a house because he would have told me not to. So at that point in life, I think I just thought I want to earn money then, and I don't think there's anything, people. That's sometimes a bit of a dirty word, but I think, sometimes there's different stages that you want to earn money. And now I do, because I understand money quite well, that, I know how to balance out projects. So now I do lots of projects where I don't get paid at all, or I get paid really little, and then and I'm always aware of money, and then being able to make sure that I can pay for everything and live. But I don't have great... I don't want that much really either.
Just the dog.
That's the
The
other
dog's
thing.
the major
The dog, he does eat Lily's food and sometimes tins of tuna, so.
So should we look at some projects?
Yeah. So this was the one that we mentioned earlier that was this was 1993. Don't worry, we can move forward quite quickly. And this was...
You're going to be here till 11.
You might remember the photographer Trevor Key, who did all the Peter Saville covers and everything, and we did this hoarding. I did it with the architects at H&M in 1993, and for British Land actually, and we got Trevor Key to take these photographs.
And it was in Park Lane?
It was in Mark Lane, just in the city, and then in the Guardian or something, there was an article about how colourful it was and how they wanted to take it down because it was just not right. And what I thought was just, what I think is so amazing is, even though I was saying about earning money in different stages, I always had a mission in life, and I've always been on my mission, and it's taken me a long time. And I wanted to make work outside, big work, and this was just amazing to have been able to do this at this time. because now it seems every day, but it wasn't possible.
No, it was completely shocking. Hoardings until then had been these sort of just black masks on buildings, and then suddenly Morag really single-handedly invented this idea of turning them into huge artworks. How does it feel when you see everybody doing it today?
I think it's fantastic because I think that it needed to happen, and in the past everything was controlled by the councils, by the boroughs, and there is still a level of that with Network Rail and TfL, but they realise the value in making these artworks and giving people some more freedom in their urban environments, and to own it as well, which I think is the exciting thing.
Well, it's creating a completely different kind of landmark as well, isn't it? Which is a lovely temporary, flexible landmark in the city. It's fantastic.
So I was just going to show. So the real big turning point for me from moving. Well, I had a shop in my old house called Her House in 2002, and then I made all these products and stuff with Luke, actually, and that was the point where I was fed up for a really long time, because what I found is the work I was doing didn't really use enough of my brain, and I wanted to use a lot more of my brain, and the only person who could make that happen is if I made that happen for myself. So then I started making more self-initiated projects, and then that led on to it took a while. We did the shop and we did lots of things, and then in 2012 I was asked to make this cafe, and really everything came together then. I could make this movement cafe. I haven't got a picture of that. I didn't put a picture of that one in, but that was a massive turning point. So since 2012, it's only been 6 years that I've been making all these big structures, but I feel that everything I've learned throughout the time, all the places I've travelled to, all the things, the people I've worked with, it all sort of just comes out. So some people it's for them when they're very young, and for me it's just taken me a longer time. So I just want to show you some of just working with lots of people making things, just show you some of the temporary projects. So I sort of see the temporary projects as testing grounds and trying things out and pushing things as far as possible that then can feed back into hospital projects or school projects. So this was a Temple of Agape on the South Bank, which was really... Now, once I did that, I thought if I never ever do anything ever again, I don't really mind. Because I managed to get this out. It was just like,
What was the Temple of Agape?
It was a festival over at the South Bank, the Festival of Love, and they had all the Greek terms for love, and agape is the love of everybody. So, and this was a Martin Luther King quote about love. So it was this idea of this temple that was not any denomination of religion, nothing. It was just this place you went in that was about joy.
Embracing.
Yeah, all embracing. And the outside was like a peacock, and then on the inside it was not decorated really, and just all cutouts from light. And I definitely know that I got that from visiting so many different places, and about materiality and using natural light to change spaces and things.
Who do you think has really influenced you, just looking at that? Obviously, you could say not the interior so much, but the exterior. You could sort of talk about Peter Blake, and I mean, you talked about David Hockney. Are you aware of any influences, or do you just sort of absorb the stuff that's around you and translate it into your own style that you've established?
I looked at a lot of things when I was younger, and obviously I was like a sponge when I was young, but I don't really look at things now. I just do, I don't ever put something in front of me and I just do it. So when I did that drawing for this, I was on a train and I just did that drawing, and it wasn't a reference or anything, so that's why it was sort of things embedded in my head. So I think that in a way I'm using a memory quite deep down from things that I've and then sort of mushing things together. So I wouldn't know. Only until after I made this, I started thinking, oh, maybe that was when I visited that temple there, or I did this thing there. Do
you take lots of photographs?
Quite a lot of photographs, yeah, but quite a lot also. I just like the experience, because the other thing is when you're making spaces like that is it's actually how you feel when you go in the space. And so if you've been to other things, how can you replicate those feelings as well with light and various things? So it's just, this is a crazy, I love this. I was doing with Luke each year in Romania. We're adding to this. This is just this crazy piece in the middle of a garden in a festival. And then we made this slide, which I think, thank God those children didn't die, because it was really scary.
Romanian standard slide.
Yeah, so this year...
you can get away with.
This year we got rid of the slide because we didn't have anything like, we didn't have anybody got hurt, but I didn't want to risk it for 2 years. This was, so where do I get my things? Well, it's just looking around.
I saw this, I was there.
I'm completely obsessed with living in urban. We used to, when we were little, we used to go to Suffolk. One of my grandmother lived there, and I absolutely hated it. I hated fields. And when I was at the Royal College, I even found it really hard that there was a park across from the Royal College, because when I was in Covent, because when I was at St Martin's, we were in Longacre, and I think I just like I like going out of it. I love London because you go out and there's always a change. And I went back to the place in Suffolk in Hadley like 30 years after, and it had not changed. And it was exactly the same. And I was just like, God, could you live here? And nothing changes, you know. So I do really love that that vibrancy. So I think it is going outside, talking to people, and I really like people in streets. Whenever I drive in England and you go through places, there's never anybody in the streets.
You should try going to America.
They're always inside their houses, you know. Yeah. So it's about just cities. I really love cities. I live built environment.
But then you want to introduce this massive injection of colour. I mean, this was in Mexico. So this is right in the middle of Mexico City. In which square was it in? I mean, it's literally in the middle of the city, like Reform.
Zocalo, the main.
It's actually
in Zocalo Square, yeah.
Were you? Is it site specific in as much as are you introducing any Mexican colours or motifs, or would that be cringe?
I didn't at the time, but when we got there, I didn't know actually Zocalo Square was the Aztec. Historical Aztec's place, and it does look quite, the patterns do look Aztec, but they weren't, it wasn't deliberate. And we weren't allowed, we were commissioned to do this, and we had to do it all through Skype because there wasn't enough money for us to go there, and I'd never been to Mexico. And then they showed me this big square. They go, what do you think about that one? And I went, oh, that looks quite nice, that one with the big flag in it. Yeah, well, I want it in there. So
it's like doing installation Trafalgar Square.
And this one was a camera obscura, so you walked inside and then it brought the images from the outside. And it was very much about looking and seeing, and which is a thing I'm obsessed about. So that you saw your familiar surroundings in a completely different way, as if you were there for the first time. And for me, going to Mexico, going to Frida Kahlo's, and everything, it was just like, it was heaven for me. It was fantastic.
Oh, my phone's ringing.
We'll skip past that one. But that was in Las Vegas.
And what was the reaction? I mean, do you get different reactions? I mean, since you do these projects in Romania and you do them in Mexico, how do people react differently in these different places?
Well, what I think the most important about all my installations is they're free. So they're there, and I mean in Mexico there was masses of queues. I don't think the poor people quite knew what they were going to see when they went inside, and depending on whether there were clouds or not, they didn't see very much, and they could see. But I think it's about putting something out in a space that is completely free, that anybody can respond to it however they want, and it's not a gallery environment, and anybody. So if somebody just says, they like the colour, or they want to take a selfie in front of it, and if they don't really get what I'm trying to get at, that's all right. It doesn't matter. You know, they've experienced something they hadn't seen before, and that works for me.
And you're talking about selfies, and you must have, your sort of renown and everything must have been so influenced by Instagram. This is such Instagram-ready work, isn't it? You can just imagine everybody's going to want to take their photograph in front of it. Has it affected your renown or your career or anything particularly that you're aware of?
What, that people can take photos of it?
Yeah, and then, or do they just not put you on, nobody knows it's yours?
No, they do know. I don't know, really. It's interesting. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure how to answer that one.
I'm just sure that your work is on lots and lots of sort of Pinterest boards of kind of designers and architects and people who are commissioning hotels and, you know.
Oh yeah, I am on all those. Yeah. I know that because they do ring me and say that yeah, no, there is a lot, but that is through doing that's a whole different thing, and they're the people who haven't actually experienced the installations, and they just pulled it off Pinterest and various things, but the people who really experience the installations, it's really fascinating because people are doing everything on image-based things, and it's completely different when you're doing a three-dimensional.
So you're offering actual real-life experience in a time of digital, overwhelming digitalness services.
Yeah, and that's why when brands and stuff, you know, they have looked at it, they don't really know what it is. they've just seen some press, and that's why press is important, but it's a different sort of thing as well. So this was a piece about this was in Graz. So this, I can never pronounce it, but there's this quite avant-garde art festival in Graz called Stierbichte Hipst or something. I don't know exactly how you pronounce it.
Who can tell us actually how to say it.
And
it's quite an important festival.
Yeah, it's quite an important art festival. And the subject that year was about open doors, migration, and they'd tried to get us to work on a project previously, but it hadn't quite worked out because I wanted to build a big bamboo scaffolding, and it cost 2 million. I only had 50,000 euros because in Graz they wouldn't bring people or bamboo from China, so they weren't really like integrating. It was a bit weird. So this time they asked us again, and we were working with an a gallery there who worked with all the different people who lived in Graz, and the idea was to make this
incomers, people who
all the refugees and migrants and things, because there's a big divide, and they wanted to bring everything together. And with all the festivals, all these festivals, they wanted to make this festival also accessible to everybody and not just the elite as well. So I did this series of workshops. There were these guys, these teenage guys who were really funny. We did have to pay them €5 to do the workshop, but actually they really liked it. And the leader, the gang leaders over on the left-hand side, he did this absolutely really, really intricate pattern for ages. And because he did it, the other boys were like, oh, okay, we've got to do it then, because he's done it. And then they did these wonderful patterns, which then I took and...
Which one's the gang leader? It's a really cute one,
It's the third one on the bottom.
With the flowers in it.
Yeah, and the hearts.
The hard man.
The hard man who did the third one. So, and then we made all these big... we made these flags that were all in the city, and I worked with many, many different groups in Graz, and then we built this. So we were given the Socialist Worker building, which was in the People's Park, but nobody went into the People's Park because it was just a place to sell drugs and things like that. So we wanted to try and re-inhabit this park, and so we made this space that you could get in it anywhere as much as you possibly could. Obviously, some places we had to have structure, so it wasn't as quite as open as we wanted. But there were no shape of door, there was no control. It was about everybody being arrival zone and being open.
Yeah, border free.
Yeah, border free. And then inside the gallery then worked with lots of local groups who then each couple of days they brought their food and everybody shared all their recipes, and then they did a recipe book. So it was about actually getting, because all the groups live very, very ghettoed, you know, and it's about bringing everybody together. So, and it worked really well actually, and it won some awards. But I think the key thing about those is it's about these little steps that then they saw the effect of that, and hopefully in Graz they might do something more. They might, you know, make something else happen, which I hope. But that's not something that I feel that I want to be part of. I just like starting things off really, and starting conversations.
I was going to say, do you ever follow up what happens after you leave, or that's not your responsibility? Is to sow the seed and prove that it can be done, and then it's up to people what they do.
Yeah,
subsequently.
I want to make things that they feel like it owns. They own it. So I do like going back later and seeing how people have then inhabited it themselves and made it grow, and they don't think about if I think they should have this colour or that colour. I don't care, you know, I don't mind. And that's where I had this obsession about belonging, because because I didn't fit in. My family were a bit strange, and in Holloway I went to the local school and everything, you know, and I didn't fit in really, and so I'd go home to this weird environment, and then I'd go to school and I'd not really tell anybody about my home life, because if I did, they'd think it was a bit weird. So I sort of kept that to myself. So and also I was a middle child, and so I never had my own space. So in a long time I was in searching to find where did I belong. And when I went to Italy, I realised that I wanted to come back to London. And then eventually, when I found the house I live in, that suddenly gave me this sense of belonging. And for me, so some people it's family, some people it's friends, for me it was actually space, that I just had the space to be able to do what I wanted to do in it. And then, so since then I've been sort of happy about that. So then I've been trying to find out in my projects, how do you make these projects bring people together, they belong, and then they flourish in that situation. Sorry, I talk too much.
No, you don't. We're here to listen to you. We want you to just talk and talk.
So shall I talk about this project, the bandstand?
Yes, let's do the bandstand, and then we need some time for the hospital. So.
Oh, the hospital, then we're going on to the hospital.
No, we'll do bandstand's lovely.
I love this. We all
like the bandstand, don't we? Yeah.
I used to watch black and white films all the time. I really loved Top Hat, and I just remembered this scene. This isn't Top Hat. Oh, is it Top Hat? I'm not sure. Anyway, I made this scene in this bandstand, and I always loved bandstands, because what I love about bandstands is they're a place that's free, that anybody can go to. So I went to Ditchling, and they asked me if Ditchling is a museum down in Essex, and they got
Sussex.
me to Sussex. Sorry, not Essex. And they got me to come down, and they were going to do an exhibition on Carita Kent. If you know her work, she's this amazing American nun who did all this screen printing. She was connected with Eames and things. So they said they were going to do this exhibition. Would there be something I'd be interested in? And I said I wanted to do my bandstand. So, because I wanted to find out what belonging meant to different people. So we did all these different groups of things, and they came up with all these amazing phrases, and each group had their own sense of belonging. And in the spirit of Carita Kent, we made them into big placards. And this was the kids as well.
What is it about language? Your work is completely based on it, but you use it in this sort of fragmentary way where you're just taking single words at a time. Is that sort of just connotative of communication?
It's not always single words. I mean, I like, I've worked with Myerscough, and I like working with poets, and
So what have you done with him?
the one hospital with him. And these are phrases, and I just thought that it was so brilliant. And each time the bandstand moved, it meant to 9 places. Each social group, had their messages at the front, so it was what belonging meant to them, which was really sweet. And this was when it was in Brighton. And this was when it was just in the local community. And what was so interesting about it is that this group here, they just wanted the bandstand to stay. I mean, obviously it wouldn't really work, the bandstand, they'd get fed up with it. But there was this nice idea that maybe each year they should have a bandstand for a period of time, and it should tour, and it brings everybody together. Because this has got a big sort of community centre here, and they've had lots of festivals each year. But that year, but nobody knows it's going on. And once it was outside in the gardens, then all these people came, and they might have been walking their dog or something, and they just all came to it. And then it started conversations, and the neighbours started to come together, and it was just really beautiful. This one was really it really worked at that space. And if you live around here, if you go to Dalston Garden, Dalston Curve, it's such a lovely garden there. I hadn't really known much about it, actually. And there's this amazing group called Arts Kickers who gave awards. They give these awards out for all these community projects, and they were having this award ceremony, and they asked me if I would make the stage for them. This was the existing stage. And so this is it there now. So if you go down there, so I work with patterns with the community, and then we hand painted it, and then we built all the stage together. So it's like everybody's stage. And I might go back there once, and then unless I'm going to the garden, I won't. I'll let it be what it's going to be.
What is the process here if you're working with community? How do you actually get to this final arch? How authoritarian are you?
Well, I don't.
You create the palette.
So they don't. So in this thing, nobody actually usually makes the thing. With this one, it was really, really fast, and so there would. And the workshop was quite short, so people only made sort of fragments of patterns. So I took the fragments of pattern and then built it into the shape. So they didn't have anything to do with the actual structure.
No, but it's their work.
It's their work, and I wanted to get as many people, so there's like 9 people's bits of pattern all integrated into the structure.
And what are the limitations that you give them? A colour palette and
so you get a grid, and you get a grid, and you get stickers, and you get pens, and I just sit there quietly and draw my own, and they do theirs. Because I don't want to tell them.
You should have done one tonight. You should have got the grid and the stickers. It would have been amazing, wouldn't it? Next time.
Yeah, we'd do a bit. Yeah, because I don't want to tell. I don't show lots of. I don't want people to try. The moment you put a pattern in front of people, they will copy that pattern, and so I don't give them any of that. I just let them do it themselves. Which then maybe takes a little longer to get into, but then you get some amazing results.
So hospital.
So we go past schools, hospitals.
Which would you prefer?
No. We're going to hospitals. So
schools or hospitals? Did you choose?
No, schools are boring. They led on to hospitals. So this was one with Myerscough. So Lem is an amazing poet. I love him, and he does lots of work with the community. And we did the Movement Cafe together. And then he went in and with the patients and did some wrote
Which
some
hospital
poems.
is this?
This is the Royal London in Whitechapel. And this was the first project I did in a hospital. And then and when you work with young patients, there's lots of complexities. It's not like working in a school. You have to be very you have to work very differently. and you have to give a lot more time and let them. This little girl was really wonderful. And so he did the words, and then they chose words, the best words they liked, and then they decorated them. And then I made an alphabet out of their drawings. And so they made these dining rooms for them with their words and that one was their words and their patterns. And that was a lovely, the little girl writes about how the walls are full of sunshine and laughter and butter and lemon, and it's just such a lovely poem to have on the wall in the dining room. It was so beautiful. And then this poem was written by a little 7-year-old boy who half in Urdu and half in English, and then I just did the type for it. And this one was the one that scared the nurses the most. Because it says dazzle, and it was for 2-year-olds, and they were a bit like, it's a bit extreme. But, yeah. But it's been there now for 6 months, and it's just really, it is very rewarding doing those things. But I don't do it with any knowledge of anything. I just, like academic knowledge of what colours or anything. I just do it because I go there and I get this sense of something, and then I think I've got to give them that. And I know that's rubbish, but that's how I do it, which is not very good to evaluate, really.
Yeah, but it's not childlike, but it almost is. It comes in the same place as childlike naivety, when you're not being affected by how it should be and what other people have done and what the template is for this. And it's having this spontaneous response of your own.
Oh, thank you. That was really interesting. I've just got a question with regard to working with councils. My local council, Brent, who I think you've worked with because you've done the local library, have just won the 2020 bid for the arts. And personally, I'd like to get involved, and I just wondered how it works with councils and what's the best approach.
So that's really hard, actually, because I've always come in via a commissioner or something, or with an architect. But I think you just need, they are a lot more open now, though. If you find, so I work with Islington Council quite a lot, so if you find the person who runs the arts commissioning in Brent, and then approach them and give them suggestions, because they're always open to suggestions as well. I think they're quite friendly. Well, I've also worked with, quite a different, the people, the councillors and stuff like that. And I think if you came up with a really good idea and put it together in a well enough form, and even tried to budget it slightly, I think they would be pretty pleased that somebody came with the idea. The only issue about some of those things is they have rules, and they have to go to 3 people, or so it all depends on the money. For 5,000, I think they can do whatever they want. Over 5,000, because of the thing, it has to go to 3, and then if it's more than that, has to go to the European, what do you call it when you give job projects out to people? Tender, and then it has to go to tender. So it's all that. But if they're offering projects, so I think it's about starting, maybe not wanting, is a bit like Dragon's Den or something, don't ask for 5% for 100,000 or something. If you go out and you have an ambition and you can work with them and take them with you on it, I think they'd be really keen.
I wanted to find out what would be your ultimate project, so from schools to hospitals to what would be a sort of ultimate public project for you.
I suppose to build something, not to do architecture, but to build something from the permanent, from the inside and the outside, that has quite a lot of functions in it as well, not just like a temple or something like that. So
not a pavilion.
Not really. No, not a pavilion. Something that because when I worked on the Bernie Grant Centre recently, and that's a David Adjaye building, you know, you can see, I mean, it's a good building, but there were quite a lot of things wrong with it, and so, you know, it's quite interesting to understand. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, I don't mind. No, I don't think it's his best building.
I don't think he thinks it's his best building.
No,
probably,
it's a maze upstairs. You know, it's really cool. So there's lots of things where you want to try things out, really, and you know. So yeah, I'd like some maybe a permanent.
But if it's a building, and it's permanent, how can it not be architecture?
Well, because I'm not an architect.
Oh, right. It's going to be made of letters.
Well, no, but I mean, why are buildings only made by architects?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, you know, you can still make buildings, can't you?
Yeah. So on that contentious
That's why I'm
note, just before we actually have an argument, we better stop. Moira's going to be around. I'm sure lots of you just want to come and talk to her and ask her all sorts of things, or just tell her how brilliant she is.
Thank you.
She's going to be here, so.
Thank you, Laura.